Welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of having a really good venture capital lawyer if you're looking to raise money for your startup. We're going to talk about what is a VC lawyer, what they do, why you need one, and then at the end, I'll share some tips on how to save money by having the right attorney. All right, let's dive in. So first, what is a venture capital attorney? A venture capital attorney is somebody that's going to come in and help you put together the legal entity for your business. They're going to help guide you through the fundraising process. They're going to be a negotiator on your behalf. They're basically going to do all the things that are necessary to help you as a venture-backed startup to get your ducks in a row, if you will. I would say one of the biggest mistakes that I commonly see entrepreneurs do is they don't get the right attorney for their business at the very early stages. And it ends up costing them a lot of money and headache later on. So that's my goal. I want to help you make good decisions and put your best foot forward as you start your company. Okay, so let's dive into what a venture capital or VC lawyer will actually do for you. The first thing that a venture lawyer is going to help you with is make sure that your business is set up correctly. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs will start their business and they'll start with an LLC, maybe established in their state of residence, but ultimately you're going to need to be a corporation, a C Corp. And the reason for this is because venture capitalists, the way they raise money, they basically require that the companies that they invest in are C Corps. And there's a lot of reasons for this that are kind of nuanced, like getting into UBTI and some other issues. But ultimately, like most VCs are going to require that you're a C Corp. And if you're a C Corp, you really probably want to be a Delaware C Corp. And the reason for that is because in Delaware, that's where the laws are super favorable, they're well established, the courts are very strong around defining different business disputes and other things. And so most corporations are based in Delaware. And I would say if you're not there, it's probably a little bit of a red flag to investors. A good VC attorney will also help you set up your term sheets, right? Whether that's when you receive a term sheet, helping you read through it, understand it, negotiate it. They'll also help you put together your own term sheet and issue it. And then once you've signed a term sheet, you'll go through a negotiation process, you go through due diligence, etc. And then you get to the closing. And the closing is going to have a whole series of documents that have to be filled out. Related to purchase agreements for the shares that you're selling, investor rights agreements, articles of incorporation, a whole bunch of things. And together they combine into what's called the closing docs or closing packet. And your attorney will go through that and will negotiate on your behalf back and forth with the attorneys of the investors until you can all come to an agreement. And they'll help advise you and so on and so forth. So that's a critical part of what they do as well. And then they'll also help with a handful of other basic legal needs often. So contract negotiation, NDAs, just some basic things related to operating the business from a legal perspective that you really want to have. All right, so do you really need one? Yes, you really need one. But there are a lot of reasons that you may not be thinking of why you need one. So one, obviously you probably don't have the expertise to put together these documents, right? And even though I've done, probably close to over 70 deals at this point, I'm not an expert on these documents. I would need an attorney to help me walk through this process, right? These are very complex, very long documents. So you definitely need them from an expertise perspective. But here's some other things. A good attorney from a good law firm will lend you some credibility, right? If they're willing to work with you, that gives you some credibility. Also, if they're the ones putting together your documents, then the other VCs, they may have done other deals with this attorney. They'll have confidence in them. They'll have confidence in the docs. All of that lends you more credibility and helps you get a deal closed. The other thing is a really good VC attorney will know what market is for different terms, right? They'll be able to negotiate on your behalf. They'll tell you, what things you can push on, what things venture capitalists or investors probably aren't going to give on. They can give you a lot of insight into how to negotiate your document and make sure that you get the best deal and that you're protected where it really matters. One of the biggest mistakes that I see a lot of entrepreneurs make is they try to save some money by going with a friend or with a family member. Maybe they even go to a law firm that's well known in their area, but doesn't necessarily spend a lot of time doing venture capital law and advising startups. The problem is that there are a lot of downsides to going that route. So if you're working with an attorney who hasn't done a lot of deals, they may not know what market is, right? So they may be advising you to give on certain things when you really shouldn't, or that you should be demanding things that you really shouldn't, and the whole process can just kind of cause you delays, which just costs you more money. They may also be billing you for the time that they're spending to get up to speed and learning about how to represent you appropriately, which is not really what you want to be doing. You really don't want to be paying for another attorney to learn on the job. And then, like I said earlier, like, they lend a certain amount of credibility. So if you bring an attorney that your investors have never heard of, have never worked with before, have never seen in a deal, like, they're probably going to be a little bit more wary of whether or not, like, you're really getting good representation. I've seen cases where entrepreneurs have worked with, an attorney that was really bright and, had great qualifications in a lot of great areas, but just this wasn't their area of expertise. And it ended up causing them tons of headaches, additional cost above and beyond what they thought, and even created more headaches for them down the road. So make sure you have a really good attorney. So how do you find a really good attorney, right? Like, most people don't work with venture attorneys all the time, and to be honest, there's not that many in relation to all the other types of attorneys that are out there, right? For every venture attorney that's out there, there's probably like 1,000 liability and injury attorneys out there. So they're kind of far and few between, and it's a little bit of a niche, nuanced industry. So here are my tips. There are some large firms that are very well known in this space, and if you use one of their attorneys, pretty much all investors will immediately know who they are. They'll have worked with them or have seen their docs before. And those are firms like Wilson Sonsini out of Silicon Valley, Cooley, who represents Apple, right? Big law firm, Gunderson. There's a whole bunch more. And I'll put a list of them down below in the description. Now, here's the downside with those firms is that because they're really well known, typically they're on the coasts and big cities, they charge a lot of money. You could be spending $500 to $1,000 to maybe even upwards of $1,500 per hour for their time. Now, the flip side is getting one of these attorneys is definitely better than getting, your uncle who's done some like wills for the family. Because even if your uncle's charging $100 an hour, he might need to spend 10 hours just getting up to speed to give you a piece of advice that may not even be the best advice, whereas one of these attorneys from one of these law firms in 2 minutes can give you the advice that you need to have. So, don't get too scared by the per hour rate, but let me give you a tip. So there are other attorneys that are really good that charge a lot less. So a good example of this is in Utah, there's a fund called Counsel. They have a team that spun out of some of the top law firms in Silicon Valley. These attorneys know what they're doing. They represent a lot of startup companies, a lot of investors. But because they're a smaller, more regional firm, their rates are a lot lower. And they're a lot more flexible in many cases, right? They're not dealing with a ton of bureaucracy. So my advice is, if you're not sure, go with the big law firms that are well known and can lend you some additional credibility. If you're trying to save a little bit of money, it might make sense to search out some of the regional firms. Just be really careful that the regional firm that you're working with has done a lot of deals and is well known in the region. One tip in order to find them is go talk to other entrepreneurs and go talk to other VCs near you and ask them, who do they use, right? Who did they use and who did the person on the other side of the table use? Because these attorneys will swap back and forth, right, all the time. If an attorney is representing a VC on one deal, they may be representing a company on another transaction. And so there are a bunch of different law firms in any given area and lawyers that show up on these deals on a continual basis, because you constantly need to have one person on each side, one law firm on each side of the negotiation table. And so they mix around. So pretty much a VC will know all the attorneys. They'll have their own thoughts on who they like best. But VCs oftentimes can be a little conflicted. So probably also makes sense to talk to some entrepreneurs, especially those that have maybe raised multiple rounds of capital or have raised from venture capitalists for multiple companies. Get their perspective, because they'll be able to tell you who they like, who they didn't like, different issues with different attorneys. And then I would definitely interview your VC lawyer and ask them how many deals have they done in the last year. They should be doing probably somewhere between 2 and 10 deals. They should be working on anywhere between 2 and 10 deals at any given time. If they're not working on at least 1 to 2 deals in real time while you're working with them or talking to them, they're probably not the type of attorney you want, especially if it's been like a year or two since they've last worked on a deal. That would be an issue. Also, ask them who they've represented in the past that they can talk about, right? Whether it's venture funds or startup companies. And then do some diligence. So if they say, hey, I represented XYZ startup, go look and see who they raised money from. And if they raise money from like friends and family, that's not going to be as strong as if they raise money from a top shelf firm like a Sequoia, or at least a local institutional investment firm. So let's talk about cost. So cost is the biggest, scariest thing about working with attorneys, right? You talk to them, they want retainers, they want to charge, $1,000 an hour, and you're thinking, I've got this little startup, I can't afford these kind of costs. Well, here's the thing, you really can't afford not to have a really good attorney. It's like they joke in the industry. The only thing more expensive than a really good attorney is a really bad attorney. And the reason for that is a bad attorney gives bad advice and can cause you all kinds of headaches later on. I've seen deals where the company didn't get the right counsel early on, they didn't structure the business correctly, and then when they went to raise venture capital, the VCs looked at all their legal docs and said, this is a mess. I'm not even going to bother dealing with this company. I'm a pass, right? Because just the legal cost to fix everything and the headache and the political part of it and the back and forth and the hurt feelings, like it's just not worth it. So I've seen VCs pass because there were too many legal hurdles. I've seen VCs look at this and say, okay, we'll do this deal, but it's going to cost you like $100,000 or more, or in some cases millions of dollars to reset everything up the right way, depending on the stage of the company. So make sure you get a good attorney to help you early on. That's tip 1 to saving money. Now, that's probably not what you really wanted to hear, so let's talk about some other tips. So a lot of these startup law firms, they know that startups don't have a lot of money, and they'll work with you. So in many cases, ask them if they have a plan for early stage companies, especially if you're just starting out. A lot of them will defer fees until you raise venture money. Some of them will even do some of the work at a much reduced price, or in some cases they'll even waive the fees as long as you agree that you will use them for future work. A lot of them have different policies in place to help startups. So ask them, what can they do to work with you and your budget to make sure you're successful and set up well? And then my number 1 tip is that if you are starting your business from scratch today, maybe you raised a little bit of friends and family money, what have you, raising a venture round that's priced can be really expensive. You should be planning to spend somewhere in the range of, $20,000 to $40,000 to raise money. Now, $20,000 to $40,000 can be a lot if you're only raising $100,000, $200,000, even $500,000. That's a lot. So one of the things that's come out and become super popular over the last few years is what's called a SAFE. A SAFE is a simple agreement for future equity and was put together by Y Combinator a handful of years ago as a way to create a document that would save founders money and allow them to raise money quickly while also having basic standard protections in place for both them and their investors. Safes are incredibly common today, especially at the early stages of a company. We're talking seed and pre-seed. Now, the thing that's great is that the document, the SAFE agreement, is broadly available. I've included a link to Y Combinator's page where they post it. They have a walk, very well understood. You basically just fill out a few blanks, decide what you want to put in there for terms, and you can be up and running for very little money. You can even have an attorney look over it for you, which is not a bad idea, but at a much reduced cost than if they were to create that document from scratch on your behalf. So safes can be really great. Venture capitalists very much understand safes, so it's not like a new document. They're going to be familiar with it. So definitely something that you should consider and that can save you a lot of money. Now, the way a safe works from a very high level is it's kind of like this debt instrument. So basically, as an investor, I invest in your company through a safe. And in that safe, it's basically a contract that says, okay, for your money, I promise that in the future, when I raise equity from investors at a priced round where we put a price or valuation on the company, I will take that money you gave me and I will convert it into equity. And as a thank you or to compensate you for the risk you're taking on today, I may be willing to discount the price for you. Typical ranges from 10 to 30%, somewhere in that range. And in many cases, I'll put a cap on what the valuation is. So basically, if I'm an investor and I invest in your company and you go on and become really successful, well, I took all of this risk earlier on, so I should be compensated for that. And so that's what a cap does. If you then go on to raise money at like $100 million valuation, but you have a cap in your safe of like $10 million, then my investment would convert at $10 million, and then everybody else would raise money at that $100 million valuation. So that's what a cap is and how that works. And those are all kind of some of the basic terms within a safe. Now, the last thing I want to say is nothing here is legal advice. Please get a really good attorney to walk you through this stuff in more detail and give you real solid legal advice. And if I only had one tip to give you and one takeaway, it's that. Go find someone that's really good. Use some of the tips I talked about. Talk to entrepreneurs, talk to investors, look at how many deals they've done, what kind of deals they've done, and ensure that they can really give you the best possible advice. Thank you for joining today. I hope that was helpful. I'm hoping that it'll help a lot of entrepreneurs avoid some of the pitfalls I've seen others make. Join me next time when we're going to talk about more ways in which you can establish your business for success. Thanks.